In this video, I really want to talk about bass fishing in the month of October. Now, I'm not going to talk about specific lures in this video, although we will talk about different techniques because I already did a full top 5 October lures video, which I will leave it linked at the very end of this one so you guys can jump over and watch that one next and you can see some of the correlations there. But in this video, I really want to talk just about some of the things that you will see happen during this month. You know, the month of October to me is kind of like the month of March. You know, across the nation, the month of March is a month where there is a ton of change. You have really the weather kind of going from really winter-esque to getting a little bit warmer, and the bass really start to move. Now, obviously, this differs depending on where you live in the country. If you live way up in the northern part of the country, you may see ice on your water all throughout March, and so therefore it is not a big change. But I would say for the vast majority of the country, March is a big month. Now, October, same exact thing. You see a lot of these cooling temperatures really start to set in the month of October, and it changes a lot of our bass fishing. So in this video, we're going to talk all about that. Now, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by Fin Fishing Apparel. And like I said, it's October, which means November and December are just around the corner, which means that the holiday season is almost here. And I really just want to highly suggest you guys checking out the Fin Fishing Apparel, whether it is a USA made sun shirt, a hat, a pair of the shorts. I got some new products that are going to be coming soon. Shopping over at Fin Fishing, as a lot of you guys know, is the best way to help support this channel. It's what keeps this channel and Bass Fishing HQ afloat and going. But I'm gonna leave some links down below in the description. Thank you for shopping at Fin Fishing. I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's talk a little bit about bass fishing in the month of October. Like I said, there is a ton of change that happens. Now, depending on where you live in the country, September and October have a lot of similar things happening to it. Like I said, in the month of September, though, in the north is really kind of towards the end of September, you will see some of these cold weather start to set in. You know, down south, you kind of see that happening more in October. So I kind of lump these months together in just this transitional period of time. Now, again, depending on where you live in the country, you may see the first part of October still with really high temperatures. For example, the most of the country right now is experiencing pretty warm weather. And I know from what has happened here recently is that this warm weather that we are experiencing on a lot of our lakes has actually made the fishing quite tough. And what it really has become is an extension of the summer. If you think about if you think about some of the hardest parts of bass fishing, like the month of September, the end of summer, when those fish have seen every single bait that we have had to throw at them, is one of the harder times of the month. Now, right now, I feel like the weather has really extended that crap, to say the least. I've noticed that the fishing around where I live is actually quite tough right now. And again, it just depends on where you live in the country. We're still seeing a lot of summertime type patterns play. But as you guys know, a lot of times in the month of September and October, I talk a lot about fishing a topwater. And one of the biggest reasons is that when you have fish that are on offshore schools and you have anglers that are so good with electronics these days, you know, a lot of these schools have seen baits. And really until that water temperature starts to drop significantly, like until it drops 10 or 15 degrees and those fish kind of know what is happening, there is this period of time where those fish are the most pressured fish and they become very hard to catch. I'm not saying you can't pull up to a group of offshore fish and catch them really quick during this time of the year, because it absolutely can happen. But a lot of times you have to hit it just right. You have to hit it just right with the bait, and it has to be a fresh school of fish. So with that being said, one of my favorite patterns and one of my favorite things that I like to do during this time of the year is simply just go fish a topwater. Now, we've talked about this a lot. I like whopper ploppers. I like a lot of different baits like spooks, even a popper. Like a topwater is a bait that personally I have tied up all year long, but definitely in this October period, all the way through the end of the year, when you cannot fish anymore on your bodies of water, I am going to have a topwater tied up. When that water temperature is in the, for around here, 70s, 60s, 50s, even upper 40s, you can catch bass on top waters, and typically they are some of the best ones. So something that I'm always going to do when I go to a body of water, if I am struggling to locate and catch fish offshore, I really try to simplify. I go up on the bank and I start throwing a topwater. And it's also kind of comes with the realization that you might have to catch a fish here, you might catch a fish there. Sure, you can still find them grouped up. But a lot of times during this time of the year, in this transition time, with so much bait all over the place and a lot of these lakes, you're not always going to catch a big wad of fish. It is here and there. And so it's something that I do a lot. It's something that I have a lot of success with. It's also something that I thoroughly enjoy. Like, look, I have a forward-facing sonar on my boat. I love fishing offshore structure, but something about kind of more or less putting those particular units on a standby mode and just going down the bank, throwing a topwater and really visually looking at your targets, love that. And also, who doesn't like a topwater bite? Everyone loves a topwater bite. So that is something that I definitely look for, or definitely something that I start to do a lot, especially when things remain really hot, like what we're seeing right now. When things are really hot, sometimes it's just best to get up on the bank and just freaking go. And so that's something that I always do. Now, as things start to cool down, there are some patterns that you will start to see develop. And this happens a lot in the month of October, where you do have these cold nights and the days won't get quite as warm, and it starts to really bring that water temperature down. Now, sometimes at the start, when that water temperature goes from summertime temps to like first starting to draw, like you will have that period of a fall turnover where things really suck for a week. But once those things kind of start to really, like once that colder weather really starts to settle in, this is a lot of times when I do see, especially in the northern part of the country, you start to see the fish feed up and they start to just be more active. They know what's going on. They know that they're going into a time period of the year where they don't feed quite as often, especially, like I said, in the northern part of the country, even the Midwest, where you get a lot of those 40, 30, you get a lot of water temps in the 40s and 50s. Like, those fish do not need to feed as much during that water temp, and the fish, especially smallmouth, I feel like are a different breed of animal. They will really go on a feedback in that fall time, and you see this in October. And you know, when it comes to making that switch, when the fish kind of go from being very pressured, hard to catch, one fish here, one fish there, or have to have that timing perfect, to making that switch, one, your topwater is going to continue to work. So that's, again, a big reason why I continue to use a topwater all the time. Another lure that really starts to play for me, and something that I start to look for, is fishing a big bait, fishing a bait like a glide bait. And the reason that I think a glide bait starts to work a little bit is that not only are you dealing with water temperatures that are start to come down, so the fish start to commit to them, but I also think that a bigger swim bait, whether it's a glide bait or like a, you know, like these Zaldane type dangerous swim bait, kind of these like mag draft style 6-inch swim baits, one of the reasons I think that they start to do well is that they just simply stand out in the crowd. You know, like I talked about, during September and October, there is bait fish everywhere. A ton of the young of the year bait fish, whether that is shad, primarily shad, could be bluegill, could be perch, could be a number of things. They are everywhere. And so the bass have thousands and thousands of these little bait fish that are like this big that they are feeding on. And sometimes you can present them with a bigger than average lure and it will actually yield a bigger than average bite. Now, there are days out there where you do have to match the hatch. This is why fall can be a little bit confusing, and I can't say that it happens on these type of bodies of water or these type of bodies of water. It's just something you have to experiment with. Sometimes when you go out there, fish a big swim bait like this for, you know, for a half hour, put it down, pick up something that's smaller, maybe a finesse swim bait or a crankbait. You know, again, as that water temperature starts to cool, which you will see especially in the end of October, cranking and spinner baits really become a big deal for me. I know it may be different depending on where you live, but when those water temperatures get cool, a spinner bait and a crankbait are simply one of the best ways to just cover a lot of water out there, to really catch a lot of fish and find little clusters of fish. A lot of times during this time of year, something that I like to look for, and I'm going to talk about this, although something in me wants to reserve it, is, you know, this time of year, inside bins, and really what it is, if I use one term to kind of look at this, it is a funnel. Funnel type areas are one of the best things that you can look for on any given body of water during the fall. And so a funnel, though, can be a lot of different, it can be a lot of different things. You know, a funnel, for example, could be an inside grass line. You know, for those of you that have a lot of grass that isn't dying off in October, maybe it's down south, you will have little ditches that go up into these grass lines, create an inside grass line. Now, those bass will actually funnel the bait to the back of that funnel where they will then eat them. So sometimes you can go to town in these funnel areas. Now, a funnel it may be grass. It also may be just simply the back of a creek. We've all heard and read the Bassmaster magazines, the videos that say, hey, check the back of creeks in the fall time. Now, this is something that can happen, but it doesn't happen everywhere. But again, what is the shape of the back of a creek? It is a funnel. It is a place where bass can really push bait fish in and pin them to a small area where they then can feed. So depending on the water that you are fishing, a funnel area can look very different, but it's still the same overall shape. Bass are going on the feed bag, they are pinning bait. So look out for these funnel type areas. It is one of the best places when that water temperature starts to cool and those fish really do start to feed, where you can catch fish. You know, a lot of us over the last couple of years have talked about ditches. You know, you probably have heard that term, and it's really become popular because of forward-facing sonar and how many people will go into a ditch to catch bass on forward-facing sonar because they tend to suspend and be very easy to see. Same concept. That ditch, where it kind of goes to the back of an area, that is a major funnel. Okay, and so funnels are really one of the best places to find a lot of these fall time bass. You can use a lot of number of baits, whether it's A-rigs, jerk baits, minnow style baits. Again, it depends. It may, if it's in the back of a creek, it may be square bill, spinner baits, lipless crankbaits. There's a lot of different ways that you can attack it. It just depends on how your funnel is shaped and what is the cover that is in that area. Also, something that we see a lot of times in October, you know, it almost seems impossible at this point because we have been in a drought here where I live, and I think a lot of the country actually has been in somewhat of a drought, at least kind of the Midwest part of the country, is you start to see rain a little bit more in the fall. And that rain obviously is going to go into all of these bodies of water, and at times it will muddy the back of these pockets, where then the bass, what happens a lot of times is bass are already in these pockets, but then when it gets muddy, the bass will actually move up and they will position in the visible cover that you can see. So you'll go into a pocket one day that's a little bit cleaner. You go in like 4 days later after it rained and it got muddy and then that sediment settled and it's still off color. Well, all those fish have moved really close to objects that you see, because if you've ever swam in muddy water before, my parents are big water skiers, and I remember going to a lake a couple of times in my life where they had just dug it and it was very muddy water because all the sediment and stuff was kicked up. And if you go under the water and open your eyes in muddy water, it is pitch black, right? So like I've talked about before, if you were in a room, or remember being a kid playing hide and go seek in the dark, like if you turn off the lights and it is like black, like you can't see, what's the first thing you try to do is feel for an object in that room to kind of guide where you are. And I do think that bass are similar. I think that their senses in that particular situation are a lot better than a human's, but they might get close to an object just to know kind of where they are, if that makes sense. And so a lot of times during the fall, when you have some of this rain, you will have the backs of pockets get muddy, and you can go to town really like doing fun fishing where you are pitching a jig or a spinner bait or a crankbait into the cover, bringing it out and just getting slobber knocked by some fish. And so in October, that is something that I absolutely will look for. Now, just like any time of the year, there's typically a shallow water population of fish and there's a deep water population of fish. And in the month of October, again, as that water temperature starts to cool, when it gets in the 60s and definitely in the 50s, man, those deeper water fish will start to group up and become very susceptible. The biggest thing that happens is that they start to just be more bitey. Like that's all it really is. Like sometimes these fish will remain in some of the same areas that way they were in late summer, but they go from not biting and very, very difficult to catch on anything to just straight biting, where you can cast a lot of different baits in there that maybe you were using at the end of summer. Now you're using it when that water temperature drops and they're just eating it. Like that can be the difference. So there's a lot of different things that happen in the month of October, like a ton of different things. And you always, as an angler, have to kind of take what you feel like you are the best at and run with it, because that's the best thing about this month is that you can do a lot of things. You can really find fish the way that you want to fish. And if you guys have been around tournament angling like myself, those are always the guys that win. Right? Like the guys who win are always doing what they love. You always hear the guys who win say like, man, this sets up like home. This is something that we do all the time back home. It's because they're so comfortable with it. They understand the small nuances with it. And those are the guys that win big derbies. Now, some of you guys aren't derby fishermen. I completely understand that. But it's again, if you are fishing very comfortably out there, if you're really good with electronics, then stay offshore. If you don't like electronics or you just prefer to fish target-oriented stuff, then have at it. You can do a lot during this month, which is what makes it such a fun month. And it's my birthday month. So I actually just had my birthday a couple of days ago. So anyways, guys, hope that you enjoyed this video. If you guys want to get a little bit more into the specific lures that I like to use, I'll leave it linked right up here. And I appreciate you guys watching. I will see you guys tomorrow.